So, hi everyone and welcome to Exchange Unplugged. Today's guest is someone many of you already know. So it's Greg Taylor from Microsoft. Greg has been right at the center of securing Exchange Online. He's led major changes like the retirement of Basic Auth and now the move forward to modern and secure app access models. Greg, great to have you back. Welcome.
Thanks, Thomas. It's always good to talk to you. Happy to be here.
So last time you were here, so we were in the thick of the Basic Auth deprecation, and now that it's project officially wrapped up, I think. How have the last few months been for you and the team?
Well, we're on to the next thing. So I think I'm getting myself a reputation as in fact, one of my VPs called me the Grim Reaper of Exchange, right? And he actually meant it, and I took it as a compliment, because one of the hardest things in the industry we're in is change, right? And turning off things that are either old or insecure or need modernizing is really hard, can be really hard. And when things like Basic Auth, which when I started it, 70 million people were using every day, I think, and it's now 0. Turning these things off is hard. And so the thing we're working on now is Exchange Web Services and getting rid of Exchange Web Services. So we have been busy. There's a lot to do.
So the deprecation of the, let's say, the authentication mechanism using the shared service principle with the first party app from Exchange Server to Exchange Online is coming to an end. It's very soon, by the end of this month. So, yeah, so how is this transition going right now?
It's going well, actually. I mean, so the team that are driving that, which is mainly the hybrid team, we work pretty closely on that, but they're really driving the work. We're helping them with the blocking. But what they've done is, in the past few months, they've done what I think we call scream tests, right? And so they have.
Oh, is this an official term?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And if you can't hear them scream, you're not going fast enough. That's the way I look at it. But it was something actually we did with Basic Auth, which was we kind of did some rolling blocking of Basic Auth, and honestly, it was done at the time. It was quite selectively done. I'll tell you as well, which was we ignored most of our, all the big customers or customers that had indicated through something they had done, they knew what we were going to do. We left them out of it. But there are many customers who don't read the message center. There are many customers who do not listen to podcasts and understand really what's going on. And so sometimes the only way to get their attention is to interrupt it. So the hybrid, there's two parts to the work that the Exchange on-prem and hybrid team are doing. The first part is the switch from the first-party app ID to third-party app ID. And then the second part of the work will be getting away from using EWS and moving, in their case, so that on-prem then calls into the cloud using the Graph API endpoint. But their work to get rid of the first-party API usage, at the end of October, we will start to block the use of the first-party app ID for hybrid. So if you have not yet done it, I strongly recommend doing it, or FreeBusy and all that stuff will break.
Yeah, so personally, I named especially the pre-block phases. I named them. So the 2 days, because 3 were planned, but it was then reduced to let's say 1 block period, so to speak, just to motivate administrators who had not yet implemented the third-party app.
Yeah, and listen, I know I joked about it slightly earlier, right? But I mean, there is no, it really is done as a forcing function. If if when we put the announcements out and we provide the guidance, if 80% of our customers had gone ahead and just implemented it, we wouldn't be doing that kind of thing, right? And so we're sort of, our hand is a little bit forced into taking more strict action because the nature of the problem we're trying to solve is a security one, right? And we take that very seriously. And, customers were not taking action. Now, I also kind of understand it's not easy to, some of these changes are quite scary, right? And they are complex, but it goes back to the whole thing of customers, these days, I think more than ever, in the light of the renewed security challenges that we all face, need to be on top of this kind of stuff as much as they can.
Yeah, but do you think that most customers are now ready for the end of the month, so for the final blocking of the first party app?
Most define well, if by
yeah,
I don't know.
Okay.
I do, but I'm going to say I think there will be a number of customers that will be caught out by this, and so they will have a bit of work to do. So yeah, I think most of the customers that are on top of this have the right people in place, have the right processes in place, should be good.
Yeah. Okay. So, the last month were pretty interesting for customers. So facing multiple implementation challenges. So first of all, the end of support for Exchange Server 2016 and 2019, migrating in some sort over to Exchange Server SE, and then out of a sudden, spring this year, then was I think it was in April, wasn't it? The announcement or the hotfix update providing the code segments for doing the move out of the migration over to the third party app. So it was just another thing to implement.
Yeah, it can be for sure. And I like I say, I think times have made things really harder than they've been historically. The security stuff that we see, happens faster and faster. And honestly, I'll say the move from first party to third party app ID, I was actually asking for a shorter timeline than the one that we provided, right? Like knowing the nature of what the issue is, it's one of those where customers, if they really understood how bad some of these things could be, or how if they're not careful, they would probably move faster. And listen, I've spent the last few years kind of working on trying to I know it, Joe, I'm turning off a bunch of stuff, right? But we're turning it off to improve security and protect our customers' data. And I can say that I don't think I've done a single call in the last 5 years with a customer, and I've done a million, where once you explain why it is that we're doing this, not a single customer has ever said, no, I think that's a terrible idea, right? The difficulty is the amount of, as you said, Thomas, the amount of other things they have on their plates and the amount of time it will take to do it. That's a challenge, never the reason. So whatever we can do to try and make it easy, to make these more, to make security easier for customers, we try and do that as well.
Okay. So did the lessons from the basic auth deprecation help you to make this process smoother?
Well, I think so. I think we learned a lot doing the basic auth thing, the screen testing that I mentioned, the kind of, the first time we, and I mean Exchange specifically, kind of in the Exchange area, because I'm not sure. It's really hard to speak for the whole of Microsoft when, it's so many products and teams. But the first time we ever did something like screen testing was with the basic auth deprecation. And honestly, the story, and this is absolutely true, was, you know, Rajesh Jha, my EVP, I remember presenting this plan, and his question was, what can you do to go faster? The answer is always, it's the classic VP response, which is, great, what do you need to go faster? And so it made me think, well, what if we just did this thing? And I kind of presented the idea of, what if we just turn off basic auth for like 50,000 customers at a time and see what happens? And I honestly expected him to say, don't be dark, you can't do that. And he said, sure, maybe not quite so many the first time, but let's see what happens. And so we started quite small, and then we ramped it up, and we did more and more and more. Now, it proved to us that it is a pretty effective way of getting attention and provoking action. And so, there's one thing. And I think another thing that we really learned was constant, clear communication repeatedly is nothing but a good thing. So the EWS deprecation that my team are in the thick of doing now, we just put out millions message center posts, counted in the millions, to customers who are still using EWS, and telling them that a year from now we're going to start blocking it. And judging by the message center post responses, and so I'm sure right? And when you read a message center post, you can give it a smile or a frown or a thumbs up or a thumbs down, I can't remember, and then you can add comments and ask to be responded to, right? Well, we get those. They are really? Genuine.
Oh, yeah. Really? Because now, as you mentioned, because I wonder every time I read a message post, who is going to notice all those reaction and comments, or is this just going to the bin?
No. We get them, and honestly, some of the best laughs I get are from some of those, because because people are pretty open about their opinions in their so at a high level, the number of people that read them and respond to them. So I'll give you some interesting. So the number of reads on message center posts is really small, right? Many customers do not read message center posts, and I understand it. They get many, and if they're small businesses, they probably have no idea what most of this stuff means, right?
They do not even not know the message center itself.
Well, that's an excellent point too, which is why sometimes we will post to and I did with Basic Auth, and we'll do it with EWS, which is we post to the service health dashboard. And then the service health dashboard, which is where you typically go when you don't think something is working right, we post messages there. So we did that because if we blocked EWS or we block Basic Auth and therefore something isn't working right, the first place a lot of people will go is Service Health Dashboard, because they want to know, Microsoft having a problem, or is it a broad problem, or is it? They don't go to the message center. So Service Health Dashboard drives up message center posts, but the percentage of customers who read message center posts is pretty low. Then it goes back to the comments. Let's just go back to that for a second. Seeing how many people read them and what the positive reaction or negative reaction is very interesting to the team that are running the change. Some of the comments, though, are awesome. Some of the comments are things like, great, thank you for telling me. Thanks for including all of the app IDs I need to work on. And others are, I have no idea what this message is supposed to mean to me. Please help me. And one we got the other day was, I can't get to my email. Help. And they didn't leave a contact. They didn't leave. So and they didn't check the box to say you can contact me about this. So honestly, we've got no idea who that person is. So we read the comments.
Okay, so I just wonder if the comment sections of the message center post is some kind of a scream at Microsoft thing. So let's say some kind of an open therapy section for IT administrators that just,
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't think that's the best. I don't think that's the best use of it necessarily. But and but I have seen obviously some pretty frustrated customers. But just take the EWS related post that we put out maybe a week ago, right? The feedback that we got led us to redo the message and repost the message, fixing a couple of things and trying to help the message land more clearly with a lot of people. And so I look at it as all the feedback I love, because I figure, you know what, it means people now know what we're going to do. And if they help us improve the message, great. If some of them are not happy about the change, that's completely understandable for some of the things that we do. But again, read the message center, and figure out the important stuff and take action. That would be my advice generally.
Yeah, awesome. So the that milestone coming up, so the deprecation of EWS sometime in fall next year. So as far as I remember, you mentioned that in our last conversation that you will start doing or having a pretty tough job in getting the deprecation of EWS up and running within the Microsoft 10, because just to verify that all the first-party apps of Microsoft who utilize EWS currently or even had in the past, just to identify them all, and these, let's say again, because I like that term now, to do the scream test with your internal developers. So are the most of the first-party apps already using Graph, or is this something that is still underway?
Great question. So yes to many of these things. So let me explain where we're at. So we are currently in October 2025, right? There is a tiny amount of EWS usage still being used inside the Microsoft tenant, and that's primarily for a couple of scenarios which are around cross-tenant and cross-cloud collaboration. They're the only ones still using EWS. So Outlook, the biggest one, Outlook, Win32 Outlook, that team have done the work to get Outlook to stop using EWS and switch it across to, I'm going to say, REST API, not Graph API. Now, there's a difference. We'll come back to that in a second, right? But all of the major teams have done the work to get off EWS. And I'm talking about things like Calendar Repair Assistant, the ELC client. There's a whole bunch of traffic. There's a whole bunch of traffic that goes on at the substrate layer, at the core Exchange layer, that has been using EWS historically and has now been switched to use a different API. Now, the different API, for the most part, is the REST API endpoint on Exchange, which is not accessible to third-party apps. It's accessible to first-party apps. And there was another deprecation we did on that. Third-party apps go through the Graph API endpoint, which essentially is a gateway and a proxy to the REST API endpoint on Exchange. So the reason why internal apps don't call the Graph API is the Graph API is a public-facing endpoint, and they therefore don't need to route the traffic out and back in again. We just route it directly to the endpoint, which is the REST API endpoint on Exchange, which is the same place the Graph API traffic ends up as well. So we just have a shorter path to get the traffic to the same place. But we have done a bunch of screen testing inside the Microsoft tenant over the last few months. We have turned off EWS and blocked teams and upset a few people probably while doing it. But we've had great executive support for doing it. The reason why we're doing this is we want our products to be completely EWS free, so that if a customer decides they want to block EWS themselves, which they should, right? If they don't need it, EWS should be blocked, and none of the Microsoft apps and services will break. So I think we've done a ton of really good work to get to that point, to unpick the complexity of all the different apps and services that use EWS, and our partner teams, Outlook and the calendar team and the, all of those teams have done great work as well to rewrite code to get off EWS and call, for the most part, the REST API. So the job now is back to the third-party developer community to go and do that, and we have about a year to go.
Well, that's not too much.
It's too long? You're saying we should make it shorter? You turn it off early?
No, that's too much. So you have certain development cycles. It's just, understanding what the issue is, especially for any stuff that is self-developed by customers. So not necessarily about something that is developed by an ISV, right? So all of the self-developed stuff, that's, it's going to be an interesting month to come. But actually, it leaves me with two questions, because some customers complain about the information provided by the EWS usage report in the M365 Admin Center, because there are, let's say, application IDs showing up that do not resolve to any application in the Entra portal. So is it possible that these are any, let's say, for example, applications using EWS that might come from a different tenant across?
No.
Because they do. Okay.
The most likely cause is it's probably a first-party app, so it's a Microsoft app. Now we filter those out, or we try to filter those out before they make it to the database that powers those reports. Now, the challenge sometimes is, in full transparency, right? Is there is no header or flag on a request that says I'm a first-party app and I'm a third-party app, right? And by first, I mean Microsoft, or by third, I mean not. And so there is no, and so we do this basically based on the app IDs and the app IDs that are used. And so we maintain our knowledge of which are the first-party app IDs, and then we exclude them from the data that goes to the customer-facing report. Now, it's possible that some teams, in their redevelopment process, have changed to a new app ID. I'm doing some hypothesis here, right? So I don't know for sure. I mean, I'm curious. I'm happy to hear from anyone who, if there are app IDs that show up that they genuinely don't think are in their tenant. I'm kind of interested to understand what they are. My guess would be it might be an internal Microsoft team still doing development to get off EWS, maybe switch their code to use a different app ID, still using EWS, and then it will probably go away once they're finished. But our goal is to try and make sure that the data that's in those reports is purely third-party apps only. It should be.
Okay, so but the other thing is that now that we talk more or less some kind of on-premises exchange, so because it's coming over to, for Exchange Server Subscription Edition, switching over to connect to Exchange Online using Graph sometime next year.
Yeah.
But the other way around, so connecting Exchange Online to on-premises Exchange will still rely on EWS.
Right.
For the foreseeable future, question mark?
Yeah, good question. Good point. And so yes. And but you know what? I'm gonna go back and just add one comment to what I was saying a moment ago, and then let's talk about that, which was we've produced a bunch of EWS code analyzer tools to help developers with identifying and then using GitHub Copilot to help redevelop code to rewrite what they were doing in EWS. And so, we're providing a bunch of things that help. So the admin reports are like an IT pro version. And then I think handing them to the developers who can then use our code analysis and code generation tools to help them rewrite the graph. And I would strongly encourage customers to make a start on that, because 80% plus of all the traffic that we see could easily be ported across to using the Graph API, right? And so customers, because, and we can come back and talk about this if you need to, but it's like a ton of the traffic that we see in EWS is all very easily done in Graph and could be quickly ported across to Graph. We want customers to do it. So going back to your question of on-prem, so, and you made a very good observation. Good, Dan. Glad you right. Which is that on-prem is going to call to Exchange Online using the Graph API. Now, why not the REST API? I was talking about earlier. Why not? Why wouldn't on-prem be calling in? Why does it have to go through Graph? Why can't it bypass Graph and go straight to REST? Well, the answer is, of course, because it's going to use a third-party app ID. It's going to use a unique app ID per customer. And so as far as we're concerned, we really can't tell hybrid or Exchange on-prem calling into us as any different from any other third-party app. So we can't sort of give it a bypass to connect to the REST API directly. It has to go through Graph. So there's one. But then the more interesting point you made, I think, or a very interesting point you made is, but then will Exchange Online be calling out to on-prem using EWS still for the time being, or, would it switch to using something else? Well, it's going to call out using EWS and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. I don't see any change. But it's not EWS code in Exchange Online that's doing it. It's essentially Exchange Online becomes essentially an HTTP client, making HTTP calls out to the EWS endpoint on-prem. There is no EWS code in Exchange Online required to do that. So think about it like this, which is, I'm in the cloud, your mailbox is on-prem, right?
Agreed.
Go on.
But, the thing is that I think that customers might feel that there is a second or a different approach regarding security and authentication. So there's a totally different approach for connecting Exchange Online. So it's not about which component in Exchange Online connects to my Exchange server on premises, but it makes me feel slightly uncomfortable that I still have to expose my internal infrastructure with an EWS endpoint, right? So that I do feel behind or even exposed from, you enhance the security in Exchange Online, but what about my on-prem infrastructure?
And that's a very fair point, right? Which is, the only EWS endpoint in that communication exists in Exchange on-prem. There will be no EWS endpoint in Exchange Online when we're finished. And in fact, there will be no EWS code in Exchange Online when we finish. Our aim is to literally remove all of the EWS code in Exchange Online. So it will be the availability service that calls your on-prem endpoint, which will be the EWS endpoint. But I think I take your point, which is that why are we not getting rid of EWS on-prem, right? Ultimately, there's really the question. And so I won't say, never, but we did have, in fact, if you remember, we did have a REST API endpoint on-prem. We introduced it back in Exchange 2016 days. And we killed that off. Guess who killed that off?
Well,
Grim Reaper.
I know that.
Yeah. And that's a whole other conversation. We could talk about how that happened. But honestly, one of my first, when we headed down this path, the realization that EWS wasn't just a third-party problem, it was a first-party app problem, and we had to get rid of it. One of my immediate thoughts was, I wish we hadn't got rid of that REST API endpoint on-prem in Exchange, because we potentially have used it. But unfortunately, that was something that we deprecated previously. Now, honestly, the endpoint exists in most on-prem deployments, so it's not outside the realm of possibility that we could potentially do something with it. But there are many, another reason why customers want to stay on-prem is they have a lot of line of business apps. They've built a lot of applications that are using EWS. And so, there are some customers who've said they want to stay on-prem because the infrastructure and the apps they've built around it mean that moving to Exchange Online, particularly in light of the EWS deprecation and basic auth deprecation, mean they really can't. So they're happy to accept the increased security risk because they feel they can protect themselves in other ways because they have all control, but they can keep using those legacy protocols. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it's assumption, but it's totally sufficient for me. As you were describing this, and I started thinking about being the devil's advocate for a second, for a moment, because there is another solution at the horizon called M365 Local,
Okay.
which contains or will contain, as far as I understand, Exchange Server Subscription Edition instances as soon as it will develop. But in this case, I do have something called M365 Local, which does have EWS endpoints. So it's, again, M365, parentheses, local, with EWS. So I think this is going to be an interesting wording game coming in the future. What kind of component we are talking about when we are talking about M365 with or without EWS. So this is the global thing, the cloud option, the real cloud option, I say, with Exchange Online without EWS, and this M365 global thingy still having EWS.
Well,
interesting months and years to come.
Perhaps, and I'm not. I think I know the thing. I worked on something that we used to ship for a while, which was kind of a local instance, in a sort of almost, I know we did some work in that space for some market segments where we would provide a local cloud, of our servers and services, but it was, but I'm not involved in that space anymore. Now, it will be interesting to know if those are built from the cloud version of Exchange, they will lose their EWS endpoint. If they are built from the subscription, can't say that word right, the subscription branch, they will keep the EWS endpoint for the foreseeable future. So it kind of depends on where that code is coming from, I would say, as to whether they keep it or not.
Yeah, it's just, I look forward to the moment when more information is being shared, on how this is going to really work. At this point, I'd say it's primarily marketing wording that is officially available. To be fair, it's just, there's something coming on the horizon. Maybe something will be, shared later in November at Ignite. Who knows?
Perhaps.
Ignite is one of those information spreading events.
I mean,
so to speak.
Over the years, we've I've been involved in a few occasions where we have tried to sort of, for certain deployment scenarios, where deploying code to a bunch of servers that run in a rack in a distant location. And it's hard, right? There's a lot. It's hard to do when the rest of the infrastructure is not around. So I'm kind of curious to see what we've ended up going with this time. But I'm not involved.
Yeah. Okay. So I do remember that. So the very first time when we met personally, which was back then at the Rangers, or then called Masters course in Redmond, which was I think that was definitely the toughest 3 weeks of deep dive technology input in my brain ever.
Right. Yeah. It was
So when you look,
it was 6 weeks when I went through it. Honestly,
eh,
3 weeks, man, you had it easy. Well, I had hair. Right, I had hair before I started mine.
okay, we're going to share those details over a pint.
Yeah.
Um, so you've been part of so many massive changes over the years. When you look back, what has surprised you the most, so technically or in how customers responded?
In Exchange specifically, you're thinking.
Let's
Um,
say in the overall context of Exchange, that's a wider context.
um, so hang on. So what's the problem from a customer perspective? Well, I mean, the whole move to cloud thing, which I know is an easy answer, right? I was always of the opinion it would probably take longer than some of our leadership believed, right? But part of the role of leadership is to set the direction and the strategy and to, enthuse everyone, right? And so, our leadership at the time was like, everyone will move their stuff to the cloud in 2 years, right? We'll be done in 2 years. And I was always a bit, having spent a lot of time doing things like the Ranger program, the MCM program that you were talking about earlier, right? Where I would spend time with people like you and others who were working on the biggest and most complex exchange deployments on the planet, working with some of the biggest and most complex customers on the planet. I was always kind of skeptical that those customers could do anything in 2 years. I mean, it was, they couldn't take
Yeah.
them more than 2 years to apply a couple of service packs, right? And keep up to date. I mean, some of them really struggled. And so the idea of let's move everything to the cloud kind of struck me as something that wouldn't happen fast. That said, those same customers are now all in the cloud. And, relatively small number have some infrastructure on-prem. Some perhaps have all their infrastructure on-prem still, and but it's very hard to find those that are in that situation these days. And so I think kind of that whole shift to the cloud, I am impressed. That for me has been an enormous, surprise that some of the biggest in the world didn't dig their heels in. But I think I remember having, gosh, I've done a lot of these over the years. We have our executive briefing center on Rep and Campus, right? I don't know, you've been in there, I'm sure, right, at some point, where it's, fancy conference rooms, and we get our big customers in, and we bring in all our execs, and we tell them what the future is going to be and everything. And side note, best toilets on campus by a million miles, right? They've got those, they've got those toilets that where the seat opens up when you walk in and it's heated and all of that stuff, right? We know how to treat a lot of things.
Yeah, sounds Japanese model to
Right.
me.
Brilliant. Love it. One of my favorite things about going to talk to customers is that's where I get the, anyway. But I remember having a conversation with a customer and kind of who were an on-prem customer, and they said, yeah, we don't, we run Exchange great. We don't need to move anything to the cloud. So I said, all right, well, I tell you what, we run it pretty good too. Let me tell you how we do it and how we operate it. And then I'm going to ask you how you feel, and of course you could, once you explain kind of what we've built and how we operate and everything else, you could see obviously the color drains from his face because he realizes there's no way they can do it like this. I just can't. I mean, it's not possible. And then he said, well, well then we'll move all of our, desk workers to the cloud, but all of our execs and everything are all going to stay on prem.
Mm. Yeah.
And of course the answer to that is, so they're going to have all the good stuff. They're going to have all the new features and capabilities, and you're not. And then course, what happens is they realize that that's kind of doesn't work either. So I don't know. And I'm just saying I've it's taken a little longer than I thought, but I'm not entirely surprised. It's taken a very long time for a lot of customers to move. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does. It absolutely does. Greg, thank you so much for joining us again, and it's always great to have you. So I think that many admins and IT pros will definitely appreciate hearing what's happened behind the scenes at Microsoft and how Microsoft continues to tighten the security around Exchange Online. Thanks again, Greg, and thanks for everyone listening and watching. See you next time on Exchange Unplugged.